Hello, and welcome to KiwaniTalk. I'm Scott Murdoch. KiwaniTalk is a community access program brought to you from the studios of WDHS here in Dearborn, Michigan. This program is aired in some 42 different communities throughout the Southeast Michigan area. We provide you with information of interest or community activities as they arrive. Joining us today as our guest is Emma Elder-Howell, and I need to make sure I get that hyphenated section of her name there, and Davin Parnell. And they are joining us from Detroit Title and Escrow. And so I guess my first question would be, and I'm not sure you guys can punt off to whoever wants to answer the question, is what exactly is Detroit Title and Escrow?
Take it.
Okay. Well, we're a full-service title agency. We handle real estate transactions. When there's a transaction in place, we actually facilitate the closing. We handle the drafting of documents at that point, also the escrowing of money. All funds that come in, we make sure that the owner, city, county, and any other miscellaneous liens are paid. And then at that point, at the end of the closing, we record any documentation with the Register of Deeds and then issue a policy guaranteeing the buyer that all that was done properly.
So do you have more than one location?
We do. We have a location in Dearborn on Ford Road, and we also have a location near downtown Detroit on Jefferson and 375.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the basics. What exactly is a title agency and title insurance?
Well, that's a good question. We get asked that a lot. So a title agency is an agency that there's two very important prongs. One is the actual closing, which I kind of touched on earlier, handling the real estate transaction, and the other important part is the research prior to it. The policy that's issued you, different from most other insurance policies, it covers what's already happened. So it guarantees that when you start your ownership, you're starting with a clean slate, meaning taxes, water are paid. The owner that sold the property to you was actually the owner, and all liens are paid. So that clean slate is guaranteed by that policy. Once that policy is issued, it's good for the entire time you own the home.
So that insurance is actually insurance on how much you paid for the home?
Absolutely. The actual title policy premium itself is based on the price of the purchase of the home. If you are buying a home, for instance, if you're getting a deal, which happens a lot now, and the home is, maybe $50,000, but actually worth $75,000, we can actually increase that for you. But it is definitely tied to the actual value of the real estate you're purchasing.
If I may interject,
Sure.
It doesn't only protect you if you are a purchaser, it also protects you if you are a lender. So we want to keep in mind with title insurance, the protection is there for not only someone that's purchasing a home, whether it's cash, land contract, and or if they're securing financing, then title insurance comes into place and it protects the lender as well. Again, giving them that sense of security, knowing that they are insuring or they're receiving insurance for property that's free and clear of anyone else's encumbrances.
Right, so I guess that's sometimes why if I'm buying a home and I see, well, there's a cost for title insurance, and I guess that's one of the things. Let's talk a little bit of how is the cost determined?
Well, the cost is state regulated from different underwriters. There's various underwriters when it comes to title insurance. So you can kind of look at it in the sense of you're shopping for auto insurance. You have different companies that you can go to, State Farms, AAA, things like that. It works the same way for us as a title insurance company. We're an agent for these various underwriters. And for Michigan, the state is it's a state filed rate. It's regulated so that we don't veer away, and it's not an overcost. There's not necessarily a calculation, but there's a rate chart. We start anywhere from $100,000 to $20,000, and you're approximately looking at about $485, and then it just goes up every $50 from there. And again, the good thing about it, and something that a lot of folks don't consider, it's a one-time premium. So you don't pay this annually. You don't pay this every year. You don't need to renew. During your purchase or during your refinance, if you're getting a loan, that premium is paid at closing, and for the duration that you own your home or the duration that you have that mortgage, you're covered. So it's a one-time premium, and it's collected during closing of the transfer of title. And again, like I said, it can vary anywhere from $485, and then it just goes up from there to $1 million, or whatever it is that you're looking for as far as coverage.
So it would be based upon the value of the home, usually with whatever you're purchasing it for.
In most cases, yes. That's how it generally starts. That's the basis, yes.
Well, and I see, as you mentioned before, sometimes there's a case of someone who is buying their home, they may see on there, there's also financing, that there are 2 charges for title insurance. Can you explain a little bit more? You touched on it a little bit before. What does that mean, or why would that be?
Well, typically, a traditional transaction, the seller, whomever is given the deed to the property, most cases will give what's called an owner's policy. So they're paying for the title insurance to that purchaser. And again, it's because they're saying we want to give you marketable title. We want to guarantee you that everything is free and clear. So we'll pay for what's called the owner's policy. And
right, and so that's usually the seller who is selling it is giving guarantees, or I think sometimes we see covenant or warranty deed. Is that having to do that they're giving a guarantee that they have good title, but then this is insurance that the money that you've paid them, that title is good?
So to touch on that, it's a lot of people have been doing their own research, and rightfully so, finding out that the best type of deed to get is a warranty deed, which it absolutely is. But that's what Emma touches on a lot when she does her home buyer seminars, is you want to make sure that that warranty deed is coupled with a title policy. Because if it's not, you're getting a warranty from an individual that none of us expect, once we give someone $100,000 for a home, for them to put that money to the side in case something happens. So that policy is what's there to cover you in case something does happen. If there is an issue with the owner, the title company deals with that. We're essentially the middleman that handles anything that will go wrong after closing, and also making sure everything goes right during closing. So hopefully none of us have those problems.
And just to go back, Scott, and again, the reason that there's generally 2 costs, again, there's the owner's policy. If you're getting financing, the lender is coming in and saying, hey, I want to be covered too, so I want title insurance as well. So that's why sometimes when someone's looking at their closing documents, they may see that listed twice. One for the owner's policy, which generally the seller will cover, but then if the lender is saying, we're giving you financing as part of your closing costs, we want you to pay for a title insurance policy for us, and we call that a loan policy.
So just like you would have car insurance, if there's a case of there may be insurance that's covering the value of the home that's being paid for, but then whoever is financing wants to be covered as well.
Correct.
Then.
Absolutely.
Right.
Good way to look at it.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, we talked about the term escrow, and I don't know what a lot of people understand. What exactly is escrow, and what does that mean?
You can take it.
Okay, so what escrow really means is that there's a third party holding the funds. So in the case of a real estate transaction, what would happen in a traditional transaction? The seller, you and the buyer and seller agree upon a price. The mortgage company agrees to finance a portion of that, but all of those funds come into us as a third party, as the title company. What we'll do is we'll give a statement to the buyer and the seller detailing down to the penny every single dollar that's going in and out of our account. Those dollars are then applied toward whether it's paying water or taxes to make sure, again, the buyer starts with a clean slate, any open mortgages or liens that the seller may have, and also we take out the funds that are needed to record those deeds. So all of those funds are held by us. Once we take those items out, we give the balance of those funds to the seller, and that will complete the escrow. Also, the other important part is during the beginning of the transaction, when the earnest money is paid, we act as a third party to hold those funds. So in the case where a seller and buyer have a disagreement, or if they no longer want to move forward with the transaction, you have a third party who doesn't have a interest in the party the same way a buyer or seller would, holding those funds and keeping them safe.
I see, I see. Okay, and so you talked a little bit about recording. Okay, so can you tell me what what does the recording entail, and what is the Register of Deeds, and why do we have that?
Generally, the recording for us would take place for a deed. For instance, if you're doing a transaction and it's cash, at the end of that transaction in the exchange of money for the deed, that's a document that we need to get down to. In this case, we're in Wayne. We want to get down to Wayne County Register of Deeds, and we want to get that document on record. The purpose behind that is to put everyone on notice that a transaction has just taken place and there's been an exchange of ownership. So what we call Michigan what's called a race to record state. Anytime any type of transaction occurs, we need to hurry up and put on notice, hey, I've changed hands and must now change hands of ownership, and this now property belongs to Scott. We need to get that recorded. So for purposes of anyone wanting to file notices or wanting to do anything after the transaction, they know who to contact. It's also, again, public information who the current owner is. The Register of Deeds doesn't only cover deeds, they also cover for mortgages. As I stated, the lender may say, we're putting a loan on the property. The lender wants to make sure that they're put on notice as well, and everyone understands, hey, we've just loaned X amount of dollars on this property. So if this new owner decides that they want to refinance or they want to sell, we want to get paid first. And the only way that we can do that is we put on record by way of the Register of Deeds, we have an interest in this property. We have a lien against this property.
I see. And I've seen sometimes that people will look at their tax listing from the city and it has one name. Does that have to do with what the actual ownership of the property is, though?
They're connected, but they're two very separate items, and that's a very important point.
It is.
So we, as a title company, handle recording of all documents post-closing. That document that you're speaking of, which most people gain access to through Zillow or a lot of the sites that people use to do their own research, is gathered from the city. The city and the county, unfortunately, don't communicate. So a document called a property transfer affidavit is filed with the local municipality, no matter what city you're in, and that's usually the information that people are seeing online. That information isn't always filed after closing because that is the responsibility of the buyer. Sometimes buyers forget, sometimes cities just simply don't work quickly.
So when people look at that, though, that doesn't necessarily mean the name that the taxes are in, or they go to the city and look at it, that's the actual owner of the property.
That is
then.
absolutely correct. That was the point. It's not. Do not rely on that. Looking at the city site or looking at the Wayne County Treasurer's site, that name is not the owner. The best way to determine who the owner of property is by way of the last recorded deed with whatever Register of Deeds. If it's Wayne, again, Wayne County Register of Deeds. If it's Oakland, Oakland County Register of Deeds. And even with that, it's not always to say that that's the last bona fide owner, which takes us back to why we're here. It's best to contact a title company and get a title search. Because just because that deed is recorded, we can go down a rabbit hole, but it could have been a fraudulent deed. Or it could have been a deed that was recorded and the person that signed the deed didn't have the property authority to do so. Those are the reasons why you want to contact your local title company.
Some type of forgery, perhaps.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
To have us do a search to identify from those recorded documents what's valid, who the actual owner is, and identify any other deeds that may reflect in that chain of recording, if you will.
I think it was very important to say, well, the taxes don't necessarily mean that's who the real owner is, and the reason why you have the title insurance is to protect you if in fact that owner is not the correct owner, or there's some type of fraudulent deed that's been recorded, because there's no real control over when you record a document. No one goes and checks that everyone's ID is correct or otherwise, right?
Correct.
Not at all. And it's not even a situation where it may be fraud at the time. It may be a situation just as simple as a husband and wife own the property. One of them passes away, but you only get a deed from one party. In that case, if you did a closing through a title company, we would see that. We'd obtain the death certificate, and then we would put on notice that that party passed away, thereby giving you marketable title. But the Wayne County Register of Deeds has a sign in the Register of Deeds, which in my opinion is a disclaimer that says not all deeds are good deeds. So that means whatever you take them, they will record. So you do need to have a title company, a title professional, not just an individual at the county. They're simply pulling what's on record. You need someone to interpret that information, give it to you, and then try to get advice, whether it's from a title company or sometimes we may even refer you to legal counsel like yourself.
Okay, like myself, who's an attorney.
Yes, yes.
So, any other last comments, I guess, that you'd want to make, or just advice to the public beyond, hey, title insurance is a good thing to protect you?
My advice to the public would be, don't try and do this on your own. You do need to contact a title company, or you need to contact legal representation, and they'll direct you back to a title company. No matter how big or small your transaction is, whether it's cash, land contract, a transaction between family members, it's best to start with the title company and get a proper search, and then go from there with how you want to proceed with buying your home.
Well, thank you. We're going to take a brief break now, and we'll return back shortly. Welcome back to KiwaniTalk. I'm Scott Murdoch, and I'm joined again here by my guests from Detroit Title and Escrow, Emma Elder-Howell and Davin Parnell. So we were talking about before some of the information that you'd want to let people know. Can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the more unusual things that you see with regard to title transactions and how the title insurance protects people?
Yeah, just outside of your standard deed fraud where someone is intentionally trying to defraud someone, we have title issues that are no fault of the actual owner. A lot of what we run into are properties where the former owners have passed away and the heirs are now trying to sell. We have properties where maybe a mother and father own the property. We have just one child. The child's trying to sell. And what we have a lot are individuals coming to us either with wills or without, letting us know that they were the only heir and now they want to sell the property. That's not enough for a title company to ensure the sale. Wills don't transfer title on their own, being recorded with the county. We would actually need a probate court order in order to do that.
So if someone passes away who may be on the title, if there's not someone else listed on the title, it doesn't automatically ever become then, well, just because they happen to be living in the home, or maybe even if the taxes are coming in their name, that doesn't mean that they have, I guess, good title to be able to transfer it to another buyer that you would be able to insure.
Correct.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. What we see is, and also depending on how the individuals are on the deed together, we still may need probate as an option. What we find is that obviously if there's a husband and wife, it would automatically pass, or if there's a situation where individuals take title as what we would call joint tenants, then they would have a right of survivorship. But if individuals are simply listed on a deed together and one passes, that person that had the 50% interest, that would have to be probated.
Right. So and sometime as an attorney, they refer to that, I think, as co-tenants.
Absolutely.
And that's a different thing than being a joint tenant, correct?
Absolutely. So if there's no notation, as a title company, it's assumed that it's tenants in common. With tenants in common, when you pass away, your estate retains that interest. So
if there's two people on a deed, that would mean that if one of them passed away, their heirs would get their share or half of it. But then there's the other term called joint tenants, and I think they call it sometimes something called with full rights of survivorship.
Yes.
What does that mean?
what that means is that instead of each person having a 50% ownership, the two individuals share 100% ownership. So it doesn't have to necessarily be two. It can be as many individuals as you put on the deed, as long as the deed is drafted correctly with that information. Once one tenant passes, the surviving tenants automatically still share that ownership. And all you would need to do at that point is record their death certificate again with the register of deeds to give public notice that that person passed away, and that would relinquish their ownership.
Sometimes with titles, I've heard the term of chain of title. Can you tell me what does that mean?
It's a series of events that have taken place with this particular property from documents. So I kind of look at it as connecting the dots. You know, we start at a certain point with mom and dad owning the property, and then perhaps they'll go out and get a mortgage against that property. So now you've pledged a mortgage. So we have mom and dad deed, then we have a mortgage. Maybe that mortgage is paid off and released. So now we have a discharge. Then perhaps they'll do a quick claim deed, adding one of their heirs or one of their children. So now we have mom and dad, a mortgage, a release, a new mortgage, a quitclaim deed, adding a sibling. So it's a series of events that have taken place with that particular property. And our job is to examine those documents, that chain of title, to make sure that everything was properly executed, making sure the proper parties had the authority to pledge this property or get this mortgage. Perhaps mom and dad was on title, but maybe mom only signed for the mortgage. Or maybe mom only deeded out to another, one of her children. So the question now becomes, in our chain of title, what happened to dad? So if a death certificate isn't recorded, that is raised as an interest or a cloud on title. So we need explanation from looking at our chain of title, our series of events. How did we get here? Why didn't he sign the last document? So it raises a question of, oh, we need a death certificate. It could be that simple, you know, but that's what we look at when we say a chain of title.
So the chain means it goes from person or entity to other party, and if something's missing in there, that's a problem.
Correct.
With
Correct.
the title, and then we have to fix it. And sometimes, I guess we refer to that. You mentioned the word cloud.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what does that mean? It means it's not clear.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah. It's not, it doesn't have to be a full break in the chain of title. For instance, if I deed to Emma and then all of a sudden, you're deeding to someone, then we would call that a break. A cloud would simply be Emma and I in title, and then only Emma deeds to you. So, a lot of things are a lot easier to fix before purchasing the property than they are afterward. That's why it's very important to get a title search, because again, as you stated, that chain of title, we go back and we search 40 years at least in order to make sure that there's been no issues over the last 40 years. If they are, we'll raise each and every one of them, and we'll assist in trying to get them cleared for you.
Now, why is it 40 years?
Well, it's 40 years because of the Marketable Title Act. That essentially, for lack of a better term, stopped interest at a certain point. So you only have to go back to a point. But again, going to the counter at the Wayne County Register of Deeds, you wouldn't get that much information. So having a title company that would have access to that much information is very important, because again, whatever you decide to do once you have the information, is your decision. But having that information on the front end is the key.
So sometimes if someone's thinking about selling, or they just want to check into their property, they may come to you and ask you to search the title?
Absolutely.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And those are done sometimes as just cursory searches where someone's looking for something specific, or it may be a situation where maybe a situation where someone did pass and they want to know the status of title because they haven't been involved personally.
Now, I've also heard the term that we talk about a lot called a title commitment. What does that mean?
Well, you're reading my mind. I just wanted to go there. And I wanted to put emphasis on, there's a difference between a title commitment, also known as a title search, and the actual title policy. Because anything that we do starts with just a title search. It's us pulling those documents, that chain of title that we mentioned, putting all that data together and putting it in a report, a title commitment, or something that's read, saying, okay, this is the owner. Yes, that owner has an underlying mortgage. Yes, that owner needs to pay some taxes. Or perhaps, oh, there's a cloud on title. Someone didn't deed out, or there's an owed interest. So it starts as an informational report, a title commitment. And from there, once we're able to clear up or pay off a mortgage or pay taxes or record a death certificate to clear up or eliminate someone's interest, if it's decided at that time, and in most cases it is, if you're purchasing, that you want to convert that title commitment and or search into an actual policy, now that those items have been addressed, then you pay a premium. Title insurance, you pay whatever the premium is,
right,
based on whatever your purchase price is in most cases, or your loan amount. You pay the premium, and it turns into an actual policy. So it's important to understand, just because you contact the title company and you say, I want a title search, and we provide you with that, that is not an actual policy. If you take that and say, well, we'll get a death certificate ourselves, we'll get our own deed, we should be good now. No, you've just kind of followed our guidelines and did what we suggested, but until you pay the premium in order to turn that into a policy, you just got to search. So you're still kind of out there without marketable
So the
coverage.
commitment many times will have what they call requirements.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
Yep.
And the requirements are, this is what would need to be done in order for us to ensure
Sure.
the policy. That means then you're protected up to that purchase price. Now, when we kind of come back to, I guess it's kind of the basic thing, but it's important to, I guess, understand for people, the insurance is on the purchase price that the title is good. So if I buy a house and my toilet breaks afterwards, I can't come to you now, can I, to say, hey, I have insurance on this. You should be able to fix this for me, right?
You absolutely cannot.
No.
No. And that's good, because some folks do think title insurance, and you're looking at it, well, you cover the structurals of my home, and we do not. Nothing structural, nothing related to items you can walk in the home and physically take out, none of that. Title insurance merely insures the land, and what the structure does is it brings value to the land. So you can tear that home down tomorrow. That does not change ownership, and if you've paid for a policy, it doesn't change the fact that you're insured. So we do like to put emphasis on that, because folks think that, well, I have title insurance, so you should be able to fix my cracks in my wall. I'm sorry, we can't. We don't insure for
But
that.
now the insurance does basically last for their entire ownership
Correct.
Yes.
of the home, unless they create an issue on their own, though, I guess is what I would say. And maybe that an example of that, could you give me an example of that for maybe perhaps a contractor or something?
Where title policy will cover you is up to your date of closing or the recording of our deed, which is usually a week or two after closing. At that point, that coverage stops, because we can't cover someone against their own acts. For instance, you use the contractor example. If someone has some work done at their home, and let's say not paid the contractor in full, if that contractor then goes and files a lien, you can't come back to us and say, hey, I have a lien on my property, because our position is that's a lien that you've created by not paying an individual. So once that contractor is paid, your policy, the contractor would be paid up until the policy. So if there's a contractor from the previous seller, we would take care of that. But a policy would not cover the insured for a contractor after their purchase.
I see.
And a good point to add to that, and that's a really good example, part of what we look for when we're doing our title search and before we're converting that to a policy, one of many things, if there was work done on the home, because perhaps you knew you wanted to sell it, you went and had some cosmetic work done, or maybe the roofing, and your agreement was, once I close or before closing, I'll pay you, Mr. Contractor. And that does not happen. And if we convey that title and that's missed, and now this contractor comes back after the fact and say, hey, I did this work before closing, that's one of the reasons you want title insurance, because you're protected for things like that, because those are actions from that owner that you purchased the property from. So you shouldn't be responsible for those type of actions, and that's why you have the title insurance. Those are things that we dig deep into when we're leading up to closing.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really nice to be able to learn all about the title agency and title policies and that mysterious term of escrow. And hopefully that people learned a lot of things to be able today. Can you give us, again, you mentioned your locations, but I just wanted to wrap up, or do you have a website people would find information? And I think I understand too that you may even do some seminars for new home buyers.
Yes, we do. We do seminars all the time. We participate with a lot of nonprofit corporations or development companies. Anyone that wants to do a homebuyer seminar, we're all for it. Education is key. We have, again, our two locations. One is in Dearborn on Ford Road. The other is in Detroit on East Jefferson. Our website is www.detroittitleandescrow.com. We also have social media, Facebook and YouTube, and we do a lot of our postings there as well.
Again, thank you again for Emma Elder-Howell and Davin Parnell. See you next time.